Okay, in this video, we're going to do two examples of adding and subtracting decimals. So our first example over here is an example of adding, and our next example will be of subtracting. So as we learned in our last video, it's very important to line up the place values in numbers when we are adding and subtracting. So the easiest way to do that when we have decimals is to line up the decimal points. So if I go ahead and do the first problem, 82 and 95 hundredths plus 4 and 5 tenths, so I'm going to have to line up the decimals. And so the 4 is in the ones place, which is directly to the left of the decimal, and that 5 is in the tenths place, directly to the right of the decimal. Okay, and we can see that our decimal points are lined up, which also lines up our place values. So in 82 and 95 hundredths, 2 is in the ones place, and the 4 is in the ones place in 4 and 5 tenths, and then the 9 is in the tenths place, and the 5 is in the tenths place, and those are lined up with one another. So now all that we do is we add like we normally would. But we do notice in this 4 and 5 tenths there's an empty space next to the 5 where there's a 5 in our other number. And so we can annex a 0 there so that we have all of the places filled up after that decimal point. And that's going to be even more important when we get to subtraction in the next one. Okay, so we add 5 plus 0 is 5. 9 plus 5 is 14. Okay, the 1 gets carried over into the next place value. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 4 is 7. And then we have an 8 here, and we're not adding it to anything in the tens place in the 4 and 500, so that's just 8. And then the last thing we do is we bring down our decimal point. So 82 and 95 hundredths plus 4 and 5 tenths is 87 and 45 hundredths. And that makes sense because we're taking a number that's pretty close to 83 and we're adding 4 and a half. Okay, so if we just did 83 plus 4, we would get 87. And so that's a good way to check and see how we're doing as far as how close our answer is to what we think it should be. Okay, so let's come over here to example number 2. We have 172 and 4 tenths minus 23 and 46 hundredths. So again, we need to make sure we line up those decimals. And before the decimal point, we have 23. And after the decimal point, we have 46 hundredths. Okay, now here it is very important that we annex zeros if we have holes in our number. So this isn't exactly a hole, but it's the 172 and 4 tenths has fewer digits after the decimal place than 23 and 46 hundredths. It does not have a number in the hundredths place. So we want to put a 0 or annex a 0 into that hundredths place because we want to make sure that we regroup as necessary. Okay, so 0 minus 6, we can't do that without going into the negatives, and so we regroup. Okay, so 10 minus 6 is 4. Now we have 3 minus 4. We have to regroup again. So we have 13 minus 4, which is 9. Once again, we have to regroup up here. We have 11 minus 3, which is 8. And then we have 6 minus 2 is 4. And 1 minus this, we could put a 0 there if we wanted to. 1 minus 0 is 1. And once again, we bring down the decimal point because our place value isn't changing in here. It does change if we are multiplying, but with adding and subtracting, we bring down that decimal point because the place values are staying the same. Okay, so 172 and 4 tenths minus 23 and 46 hundredths is equal to 148 and 94 hundredths. And that makes sense once again, because if we think about 100, 170 minus 20, that's going to be 150. And our answer here is close to 150. So we can use estimation to see if our number is close to where it should be.